Alright, we should be live. We're back. We're working on Teval, Arbiter of Virtue. Here she is in case you haven't seen her yet or you need a reminder of how she works. And we got under 100 cards yesterday, but just barely. So, we're making progress, but we still need to cut 38 spells off of the list to make room for all of Teval's lands. And Teval does need her full 40 lands, I'm pretty sure. We don't run a ton of ramp besides Teval, so, and all of it is very cheap with the idea that we are going to ramp into Teval, and then Teval is going to take care of the rest of the ramping for us, along with a bunch of mill cards. So, yeah, so Teval's at 98, and we need to get her down to 60. And it has been very slow going. Everything left on the list is either a utility card or a card that I want to play in the deck. And that has been true for the past, 50 plus cuts also. So it's become a question of, well, what don't I need anymore? So we're going to start at the bottom of the regular list and work our way up. One of the easiest ways to do this is just taking the break and coming back and looking at it without having been thinking about it for a day. So, Amzu. Still really want on the list. Once per turn, when cards leave my graveyard, I make a 1/1 insect, and it gets 1/1 counters equal to the highest casting cost among the cards that left my graveyard for this trigger. So, if I exile at least one, 5+ drop while casting a spell with Delve, that's going to trigger Amzu, and we're going to make a 1/1 insect, and then it's going to be if the highest casting cost was 5, it's going to be a 6/6, and then Amzu gives it Menace. So, it doesn't take a whole lot from that point to win the game. And large menace creatures might just be able to put enough pressure on one or more of the opponents before Wrath Effect kills everything. So, out of all of the make a creature when cards leave my graveyard, I think this might be one of the stronger ones. And because this one doesn't require it to be a creature, we're doing even better. Most of them require a creature specifically leaving my graveyard, so. Alpha Deathclaw is one of my better catch-all removal spells in that its initial thing can kill a non-land permanent, and then... Actually, no, it's not even a non-land permanent, right. This one's the better one because it just straight up destroys a permanent. So, it's a Vindicate as a giant, angry lizard mutant. But then its monstrosity can also destroy something. So even, Norn and Torpor Orb, and whatnot, don't necessarily stop this thing from killing the permanent I need it to kill. Lord of Change is one of my big card draw spells. Devil's Judgment is the card I feel like most rewards me for cards leaving my graveyard. Sometimes it can make a 2/2, it can make me a treasure, and it can draw me a card. So it doesn't really care what's leaving the graveyard, and it can trigger multiple times per turn, but I can only choose each mode once. Will of the Temur is another one of my big card draw spells, but it can also make a 4/4 flying dragon that is a copy of one of my other cards on top of that. So I can make, for example, a dragon copy of Exquisite Blood, or a slightly smaller version of the Conquering Vampire, whatever its name actually is. That is the creature version of Exquisite Blood. I can make copies of Teval's Judgment, things like that. So, really like the idea of Will of the Temur in the deck. Also, that's the main reason why the one Astral Dragon is on the list, is to be able to make token copies of some of my scarier things. The Astral Dragon does have to be a non-creature thing that it copies, but we have plenty of those that I would like to have extra copies of in play. Other Teval, like Commander Deck Teval, is also on the list, because she self-mills, and she buys back dead land, and when cards leave my graveyard, I get a 2/2 zombie, so she's doing all of the things to complement the other Teval. Metamorphosis Fanatic is a reanimator spell that gives lifelink to the thing it reanimates. And I really need to gain life, let's be honest. There's Astral Dragon. Skeleton Crew can come back from the graveyard and gives me a skeleton when things come back. Honestly, that might be one of the weaker ones still on the list. The upside is that it itself can come back for 6 mana. Of course, because I'm activating the ability rather than casting it from the graveyard for this mana, I do have to spend all 6 on the skeleton. Yeah, if I'm being honest with myself, this might be one of the weaker ones in this family of effects, so as much as I don't want it to go. This is why we start at the bottom. By the time I get to the bottom, I'm kind of burnt out and just acknowledging things. So, realizing that I have Teval's Judgment and Teval herself already, plus I know and Amzu, and I know I'm going to have what's its name? The Chalk Outline later on. Do I need Insidious Roots? I might legit need Insidious Roots. We'll figure that out later, once we see what the rest of the deck looks like. If we cut too many of these type of cards, then a card like Insidious Roots gets a lot worse. I think Insidious Roots is all of my... Oops, I already had Gatherer open. Is all of my tokens, not just the plants. Yeah, creature tokens have tap out a mana of any color, and whenever one or more creatures cards leave my graveyard, I get a 0/1 plant and then put a 1/1 counter on each plant, so it certainly has potential. I think I skipped over it initially because I didn't realize how many of these things I would actually have on the list. I'm going too fast through these things because I'm talking about one thing without paying close attention to the others. Alright, so we got rid of the Skeleton Crew. Fierce Guardianship is a free counterspell, and I don't think I can make a blue commander deck with a creature. Well, actually, Fierce Guardianship doesn't care if it's a creature. It cares if I control my commander. So yeah, I don't think I can make a commander deck where in blue where I don't run Fierce Guardianship. Like, I have been able to cut all of the other free spells for various reasons based on the deck that I am making, but yeah, Fierce Guardianship is the one where it's just like, no, that lives in my deck, and as long as I'm running blue, I am probably running that card. Grace's Judgment as a catch-all removal spell. Arcane Signet. Scavenging Ooze is my graveyard hate. Profane Transfusion. Yeah, this one's just way too strong in our deck. Doming ourselves for 8 actually makes it, or 9 rather, actually makes it better. As long as we live through the damage dealt to ourselves, swapping life totals is just better when we've taken an extra 9 damage. 6. 6 is one of my better recursion cards, allowing me to buy back basically anything. Like, 6 does not actually have to attack. If it can, then we're doing well, but Like, if 6 actually gets to mill us and buy back lands that we've milled, that's fine. But I'm way more concerned about all of my permanents in graveyard having retrace, so I can discard a land and recast something that I've lost that I suddenly need back. And we are casting it, which means we can exile the other cards from the graveyard in order to cast them. Excuse me. I'm suddenly very, very phlegmy again today. But only once I had started talking for like 10 minutes, so. Alright, so Archon of Cruelty, one of our better payoff cards. Drains the opponent, it kills their creatures, it gains us life, draws us cards. It basically does everything. Expropriate as one of our big payoff cards, because that thing is just impossibly dumb. Bloodthirsty Conqueror to gain us back life. Archive to double up on our life gain. Garrick's Wake to kill all of our opponent's stuff without killing ours. So, Swiftfoot Boots I was talking about yesterday, and it could still be the cut. But we have a lot of creatures with not only ETBs, but ETB or attack triggers, and a few that are just straight up attack triggers. So, I really want to keep this in the deck. I want those creatures to be able to attack immediately. Like, yes, other Teval, if I can cast another spell after she's resolved, I'm going to get the 2/2 out of her. But I would really like to get the full value of attacking and milling and getting a land from my graveyard. And then, if I do cast anything else after that, making another 2/2 after getting the one from the land coming back. Visits as a ramp spell. Ugin as a catch-all removal spell that then turns my few artifacts in the deck into catch-all removal spells. Because even without a ton of ramp, we are still running multiple colorless spells. I know we got rid of a few of them, and I'm gonna die. Hang on a second. Alright. I know that won't stop it for long, or possibly even at all, because I can already feel it again, but I just need to hack up a lung real quick. Alright, so I think we have enough colorless cards still on the list that Ugin is viable. We might need to double check that, but I'm pretty sure we still have enough. Our actual commander, Teval, probably should stay in the deck. Glacierwood Siege has 2 different modes, and they're both good for us, so being able to self-mill when we cast instants and sorceries is useful. Being able to play lands from the graveyard is helpful. So both modes are viable. Also, we have 2 different cards that can make token copies of this enchantment, and therefore get to choose the other mode if we need to. The being able to play lands from the graveyard is kind of redundant. We don't ever need 2 of them. But if we get into a position where we already have that effect going, then we can make the self-mill version. Or if we start with the self-mill version and we still haven't found Crucible, or we milled it and we haven't gotten it back yet, we can make the Crucible side of it. Waken the Honored Dead is a catch-all removal spell that also mills me a bunch and can buy back a dead creature or a land later on. Dredger's Insight. This is one of the weaker cards still on the list, but I need cards that mill me early, so that way when Teval comes down, I have the potential to cast a cheaper spell immediately off of Teval. by exiling from the graveyard. Like, if I've been milling myself a bunch, it might not even need to be cheap. It might just need to not have too many colored mana pips in its requirements. Like, if I can cast Teval for 5 mana and still have 2 mana left over, like, in colored mana, then most of the spells in my deck become viable at that point as a follow-up to casting Teval. So... Overlord of the Baelmerk is probably one of the best, if not the best, of the cheap self-mill cards. Being able to cast it as a 2-mana enchantment that mills me, and then having that later become the Overlord and be able to attack and mill me more is great. And be able to cast it in the mid to late game just as itself. Back to the Roots as a catch-all removal spell. Glarb, Calamity's Augur. I really don't want to cut Glarb. Glarb has a lot of things going for him. I said it yesterday, too. If he did not have the ability to play lands, I could probably cut Glarb pretty easily here. But his ability to let me play lands, still let me play the expensive spells off the top of my deck, which most of my spells are pretty expensive, and the ability to mill cards off the top of my deck if I need to. Like, all of that in one card is actually super helpful and a lot of advantage. Like, Glarb is one of the better creatures in my deck because of all of that. 3 steps ahead. One of the main reasons I don't want to counter or don't want to cut this is that that leaves me with like 3 counter spells, I believe. It's either 3 or 4. I have between 4 and 5 total counter spells, so cutting this one, I know we have Fierce Guardianship, Disallow, Mana Drain, and Force of Will. There might be one other one. So if I cut this, then I'm down to 4 counter spells, maybe 5. And it lets me draw cards, and it lets me make a copy of one of my creatures. We do have some pretty potent non-legendary creatures to copy. Yeah, I might have to cut it just for room, but I don't want to. Let's keep going. Doppelgang, probably one of my best payoff cards with X. Well, it's one of my best payoff cards to begin with, and one of 2 that still have X in the casting cost. Because I'm going to take a big hit from casting this thing, but it is very easy for me to gain back all of the life that I'm losing and then some with the right cards to copy. Like, X equals 3 copying, you know, if we ever copy Verdant Sun's Avatar at that point, just getting 3 copies of that and having 4 copies trigger to gain me, let's see, 15 life per copy. So, quick 60? You know, just casual, gain 60 life. In exchange for taking 11. That seems reasonable. Yeah, Doppelgang might be one of the strongest cards in the deck once Teval is going. So, I don't think I can cut that. The only way I can cut that is if I cut too many of the things that are good to copy with Doppelgang. Chalk Outline just rewards us with card draw and spare bodies while we're doing the thing that we're going to do anyway. Aftermath Analyst, one of the cheap cards that can self-mill us early, and later in the game, pulling back all of those lands means that instead of having to exile each one of the lands for extra mana, we just get to have all of that extra mana to work with. Up the beanstalk, basically for the same reason as Glarb. Like, most of my spells fall into the category of triggers this thing and draws me extra cards. So it's not hard to get this thing working, so that way I have a steady supply of cards to work with, since that's one of the bottlenecks for this thing. The main ones are life and colored mana. Like, those are the two things that will most likely stop me from casting a spell. But not physically having another spell to cast will also be a bit of a bottleneck, so I want to make sure I have decent card draw available. Hence Glarb and Will of the Temur and Lord of Change. You know, all of those cards putting a lot of extra cards in my hand. Reach is one of the cards that can go, but it's also a very powerful spell in and of itself. Like, it's nearly impossible for me to not get 7 mana worth of value off of this in anything less than heads up. You know, like, if we have two opponents, which, you know, is pretty typical for a commander game if you don't have a large commander community. Yeah, just having two opponents, it's so hard milling 10 cards from 3 players to not get 7 mana worth of spells. It is possible, though, depending on the style of decks that the other players are playing. Like, obviously, our deck is pretty stacked in favor of this working. But a combo deck where the individual pieces aren't particularly useful to us, or a deck that's going super wide with lots of creature token makers and whatnot, might not have the best cards. And even then, you know, hitting one of their powerful creature token makers or like a planeswalker that's there to enable, you know, hitting one of the Elspeths is perfectly fine. Yeah, I can see Breach going just because we have so many other good cards, but Tear Asunder is a catch-all. We draw a ton of extra cards. Sheoldred is just helping us out here. I don't even care that she's draining the opponents, honestly. Like, that's nice, and if we had a version of her that did not have that, I would probably be running it, if only because Sheoldred is such a must-kill for most players because of the cards they intend to draw. That is actually hurting her survivability. Like, if I just played a card that said every time I drew a card I gain 2 life, I don't think most players would care, and that card is a lot more likely to die because of a board sweeper. But Sheoldred is a must-kill for a lot of players, so I will actually lose my life gain for card draw card more often because other people are scared of her other ability than to stop me from gaining all the life. Shigeki is one of my ways to buy back stuff. Jin-Gitaxias Progress Tyrant is one of the better things I can ramp into or cast after Teval, just to stop people from being able to deal with my board. Like, oh, you're going to cast a spell? That's neat. So, now that you've cast that and gotten it countered, what is your follow-up spell that you actually wanted to resolve? Yeah, the fact that a lot of the time Jin-Gitaxias is going to be a 2-for-1 to get rid of him, and better than that if they don't have it. All times down to just being lands. Really want to keep Lithoform Engine. I cut all of the other ones that were variants on it, but because we're not spending the mana on the spell itself a lot of the time, we should have enough mana left over to activate Lithoform Engine and just straight up copy the spell. We have a lot of incredibly potent spells to copy. That's kind of the whole point of the deck. Shadow Spear for life gain, and to take away Hexproof and Indestructible off of our opponent's thing, so that way all of our destroy target creature or target non-land permanent effects will work. Oko. It's just Oko. Like, shutting down problematic things, turning off the opponent's commander until they get it killed and recast it. Emry, we were thinking about cutting Emry, and we were thinking about cutting Sidisi, and we wound up cutting Sidisi. Now, Emry is probably the weakest of my self-mill cards. She only mills the one time on ETB, and she costs more than the other one-shot self-mills, and her thing about pulling back artifacts is not the most important thing. Yeah, if I cut one more self-mill card, it's going to be Emry. It's between her and Sidisi last time. Hoping not to have to cut any more self-mill, because I do want all of that early setup. But Casualties of War. Casualties of War falls in the same category as Fierce Guardianship. If I am playing black and green at the same time, Casualties of War is in my deck, and there's no real stopping it from being in there. Like, that is just way too much value. Being able to blow up one of every permanent type except for battles. And lands, I think, but still. Being able to kill a creature, artifact, enchantment, and planeswalker. Just way too good. Actually, no, it does destroy land, doesn't it? I know I've blown up lands with Casualties of War. Assassin's Trophy, full other end of the spectrum. Kills the permanent, then gives them a replacement land, but it only costs 2 mana. And sometimes it's way more important that you be able to kill the thing with the mana that you have available than how big an impact the removal spell is having on the game outside of killing the one thing. Ilva, life gain, card draw. Muldrotha gives me access to my whole graveyard for recasting permanent spells. Burn Sun's Avatar, one of my better life gain things. A lot of my things are making tokens or exiling cards from my graveyard, so it's not that hard for this dinosaur to just gain me a ton of life. Just from that happening alone, I don't even have to cast my other big scary creatures or reanimate them or anything. Just, casting another spell and exiling a creature from the graveyard might give me like 1 to 4 bodies and a ton of life because of that. Heroic Intervention. This is one of those cards that's a staple for most people that I don't mind cutting, but I do like it in this deck. Not having to save the opponent's creatures with my counterspell is like the biggest argument for this thing. Like, it still counters the board wipe most of the time, depends on what the board wipe is, but for the most part, it still counters the board wipe for me. Like, I don't get negatively impacted by it, but everybody else still does, so as long as it's not Farewell. Or similar cards, but Farewell is my go-to. I think Farewell is just slightly above the power level for Wraths, and it's kind of annoying. It's slightly above the power level and in a single color, so it's ubiquitous, whereas something like Merciless Eviction, while still being brutal to a lot of the decks that Farewell is brutal to, doesn't quite reach out. Like, even if you didn't have to choose, if you could do all the modes, it would still be a thing, but because it's limited to decks that have black and white at the same time, it's not that bad. But yeah, every single white deck having access to Farewell, is incredibly frustrating when you have fun graveyard effects. It's like, White has a billion ways to exile graveyards. It didn't need to be able to exile all of the permanents that I wanted to have in play and my graveyard, so I can't get those things back either. Alright, enough complaining about Farewell. Farewell is probably my second or third least favorite commander card. I'm trying to remember other ones besides Thassa's Oracle. I hate Thassa's Oracle. Thassa's Oracle is the one card that if they banned it, I would just be like, okay, that's good. I hate playing against that thing. Alright. Noxious Gearhulk as a removal spell. It also gains me life is the biggest thing, and I have a handful of Reanimator spells, so... Noxious Gearhulk. It's one of the few ways I might go up in life from casting the spell. Like, yes, it's a 6-drop, I need to kill something with 7+ toughness, but if I ever do, I'm actually net gaining life for casting him while killing something that was probably going to kill me. Ulamog is just our big, scary thing. Exiling 2 permanents as a cast trigger is just so obscenely powerful whenever I do it. There's always, 2 things that are absolutely worth just getting rid of. And if he just, takes away 2 lands, even that's pretty brutal. Because it's definitely depriving people of their ability to interact with him if they don't have an incredibly cheap removal spell after that exiles. So, just hit the player that isn't playing white with the double land loss, and that'll probably keep Ulamog safe from their removal. Torrent Elemental, as the only one still on the list that I can play from exile, it's definitely the strongest. Its biggest downside is that I cannot discount the mana to bring it back, but it is only 5, so that's reasonable. And it can force through damage, and then, what's the opponent? The opponents basically have to tuck it back into the deck, because anything else does not stop it. If they kill it, it goes to my graveyard, I immediately exile it to cast another spell, and then I can replay it again. Courser of Crufix for the extra land drops, for making sure I hit my land drops consistently, and life gain when I am. Erebos for massive life gain, and giving my Doomsday creatures one more shot at the opponents. Now, whipping back Archon is a little sad, because then I can't ever get it back again, but it's a way to gain a ton of life very quickly, so if I'm low on life, this can allow me to cast other spells to help stabilize just by getting back a large, aggressive creature to gain a ton of life off of just being in play for the 1 turn. And all my stuff having lifelink, never going to be a bad thing in this deck. Cyclonic Rift can only hit me for 2 and can bounce the entire board. Exquisite Blood to gain back life. See, this is the part where I've been going through the list for so long that I'm just acknowledging the cards, rather than going am I going to cut this? None of these are things I want to cut. There is a slim chance that I cut Torrent Elemental. As good as it is in the deck, it's not perfect, and we don't need it. It can be very helpful, though, just tapping down all the defender's creatures when it attacks. means that I'm almost definitely getting through for damage and dealing a ton of damage, most likely, given the nature of my deck. So, as long as I don't need to attack multiple players and kill multiple players for this to work out, because it only tops down the defender's creatures, not everybody else's. It might wind up going just because I don't have room for it, not because I don't want it in the deck. Which, let's be honest, that's kind of how everything's going right now. Like, do I still need Karn Liberated with Ugin Eye of Storms in the deck? I have Ugin, I have Ulamog. Karn is not a cast trigger, but Karn is incredibly powerful nonetheless, so. But maybe. Honestly, I can see that. I can see cutting Karn because I have the other two, and then I have a bunch of cheaper things that can kill basically any card. I don't need Karn specifically. Alright, Fangren Marauder. I make some amount of artifacts that I can sacrifice, and it just needs one player making treasure tokens or something, and we're going to gain so much life if they don't kill Fangren Marauder before they use them. Yeah, I have a lot of trouble cutting this one. If I did not have a handful of artifact token makers where I was just going to be able to gain life anyway from artifacts dying, just naturally. Plus, I'll gain life whenever I kill one of their artifacts, so if they have something particularly problematic and I need to nuke it, that's going to be 5 free life from this thing anyway. Yeah, cutting the Sangromancer is fine. I can't make the other players discard, and while their creatures are definitely going to die, a lot of time they'll be dying because Sangromancer is also dying because everything is. Yeah, I want to keep the Marauder right now. Consecrate Sphinx, Exsanguinate. Yeah, as the only other surviving X spell, Exsanguinate is just way too powerful. I'm always going to gain back X for having one opponent, so as long as I don't die from casting it in the first place, I can cast it for as high as I need X to be. But if we have more than one opponent, getting to hit like everybody for like I take 10, everybody else takes 8, and then I gain, like 16 to 24 life back. And that's assuming that I don't have anything else in play that rewards me for the life gain, like an archive or one of the when opponents lose life, I gain that much life type effects going on. Yeah, it's a finisher when I have enough life and a way to gain a lot of life back when I'm a little too low. Plus, being able to exile X cards from my graveyard to cast it means that it will be a finisher most of the time. Can be Basilisk Collar. I really don't want to. I want one more way to give my creatures lifelink cheaply, and I don't want just Whip of Erebos and Shadow Spear to be the only ways I have to straight up do that, with the side benefit of the 2 Exquisite Blood variants being if I hit the opponent, I will functionally have gained. It will like function similar to lifelink, but with a triggered ability, so like old school Spirit Link type effect. Right of Replication. It's no doppelgang, but it's close. Is it too far away though? 5 copies of some of my creatures would be absolutely devastating. 5 copies of some of my other creatures wouldn't do much at all. Like 5 Archon of Cruelties is obscene, but yeah, like 5 Hedron Crabs, that can mill people out, but it's not really what I want to be doing with it. And 5 of any legendary creatures, just all of the death trigger ETBs and death triggers, and then they're all gone. So it could be Rite of Replication. I'm a little sad because things like Kicker are the best things to take advantage of how this deck works to avoid taking tons of damage while still casting high impact spells. Like only taking four damage for casting this, even if it's a 9 drop, is pretty strong. And being able to exile up to 7 cards from the graveyard to get its casting cost down, also really good. Do love me a Hedron Crab. Being able to mill myself 3 for landfall when I'm running every fetch makes this thing one of the better early mills. Like, I think Overlord of the Belmerk is the better one, because it doesn't require playing a land, and it's going to mill me, but if I'm not playing lands, then things have gone horribly wrong anyway. So, like, if I go turn 1 Hedron Crab, I better be able to turn 2 play some land. Turn 2 and 3 and 4 play land. Otherwise, things have just gone completely off the rails, and I don't know. Like, did I mulligan to 5 at this point? Is that what happened? Bloodchief Ascension. Once it's online, it just does way too much, and it's very easy for us to get it online. Glendra Archmage. That was the other counterspell that I have in here. I have Glendra Archmage. I do really like having access to it. Most of the problematic cards for this deck are going to be non-creatures. So, being able to stop them from killing all of my things, breaking up my setup. But I gotta cut stuff. We've got 2 cards on the list. It is 40 minutes in, and I have 2 cuts. Like, this is abysmally slow. Well, Primus, Polluted Bonds, Damnation. With so many other things I have that kill stuff, maybe Woodfall Primus can go. I'm not straight up Reanimator, I only have a couple of reanimation spells. And it's always going to be triple green at least. It does feel bad even considering cutting Woodfall Primus, so this is another one of those cards that makes it into nearly every green deck that I build. But maybe I have enough other removal that I don't need Primus. Still feels bad. Farseek, Top staying. Steve is almost definitely staying. Eternal Witness should stay. Crucible, Well of Lost Dreams. Just way too much card draw in this deck. Like, I'm trying to gain as much life as possible to offset all the damage that I'm taking. Is it Mindslaver? I feel like I cut Breach before I cut Mindslaver. Breach usually gives me 7 mana worth of value, but Mindslaver is definitely going to give me 10 mana worth of value. Unless the opponent has no way to mess up their own game plan or anybody else's that's not me. And even then, I should be able to get it back and hit somebody else with it, or hit the same person once they've gotten better stuff to work with. Lightning Greaves, because I'm cutting the Swiftfoot Boots before I cut Greaves. I don't really need to target my stuff that much. And, I can always move the Greaves around if I do. Not always, but it's a very rare set of circumstances where my only creature in play doesn't have lifelink and needs the Shadow Spear or something equipped and can't equip it because I have lightning greaves attached to it. Fabricate tutors my artifacts. I don't think even if I took out Fabricate, I'd want to put in something like Grim Tutor and just take the 6 damage for casting it. So I'd rather have Fabricate, I think. If there was one more reasonable cheap tutor, I might take that over Fabricate, but that's still removing a card and adding a card. I would need to be able to remove multiple cards in order to make a lateral move like that. For it to matter right now. Mental Note, Self-Mill, Traumatize. Self-Mill and then wins the game if I have Blood Chief Ascension online. Just if you could just mill 20 cards and take 40 damage, that'd be great. Time Stretch to go along with Expropriate. Roll Rack. Animate. Etheric, Worldly, Mystical. Looking at Worldly and Mystical, I've been looking at them for a while, and every time I think about cutting them, it's this just feels wrong. Grim Feast is one of those cards I'm trying really hard not to cut. Every time an opponent's creature dies, I gain life equal to its toughness. Is already pretty strong. And in this deck where I'm converting life into other resources or need life in order to cast my spells, you can gain an absolute ton of life off of this thing over the course of a game. So Will, Nature's Lore, Mana Drain, Soul Ring, and Demonic Tutor. Alright, after all of that, let's go find the other copies of Karn on the sub lists. And Woodfall. Pretty sure it's on both the same sub lists, yeah. Both removal and big payoffs. We are at 50 minutes and I've cut 3 cards. That is abysmal. Alright. Well, now that we've looked at the entire list again and managed to make 3 cuts. Alright. Big fancy payoffs. We have Alpha Deathclaw, Lord of Change, Will of the Temor, Metamorphosis Fanatic is a 6-drop, so he gets on the list. Astral Dragon, Profane Transfusion, Archon of Cruelty, Expropriate, Ugin, Doppelgang. Honestly, it feels like I'm going to lose Breach the Multiverse, not because it's not good enough, but because I just don't have room. Breach the Multiverse, probably Rite of Replication, too. Like, I need big splashy payoffs, but I have so many on the list. I just don't have room for all of them. I would rather have some of the other things that are on this list. Like, I would rather have an Ulamog than either of these. I would rather have Muldrotha, Jin-Gitaxias. Noxious Gearhulk is on here because it's a 6-drop, but it's more of a removal spell than anything. Similarly, Metamorphosis Fanatic is a reanimator spell, but it's also a great reanimator target. But yeah, I'm not cutting like Alpha Deathclaw, Lord of Change, Will of the Temor, Astral Dragon before I'm cutting any of these. So, Profane Transfusion. I don't think I can cut Profane Transfusion. That just seems perfect for the deck. And I've already cut a few other cards that seem perfect for the deck. Alright, so cut those from the big splashy spell category. Next up is Life Gain. Grim Feast, Polluted Bonds, Bloodchief Ascension, Basilisk Collar, Exsanguinate, Vangard Marauder, Exquisite Blood, Whip of Erebos, Courser of Krufix. Are Courser or Tadiova just too low impact? Courser draws me a card whenever there's a land on top while I have a land drop to make. Gains me a life for each land. Tadiova, every time I hit a land drop, I gain a life and draw a card. You're not really helping the main thing. I do get to play a lot of lands from graveyard later in the game. It might be both of them at this point. Like, I don't have a lot of ways to make extra land drops aside from cracking fetches, so I'm not gaining more than 1 life per turn off of either of them. That's not entirely true. Teval can put, like, other Teval can put land into play from my graveyard, but yeah, it's probably just not good enough. I have a bunch of other card draw, bunch of other life gain. Yeah, okay. These are the type of cuts I need to figure out if I can make and start making them, because this is taking forever, and I really want this done by next weekend. I want to be focused on the new set once the new set is out. Mental Note, Hedron Crab, Thought Scour, Emery, Aftermath, Overlord, Dredgers, and the Honored Dead, Glacierwood Siege. Alright, so the worst 2 cards left are Dredger's Insight and Emery. I do like that Dredgers is going to keep gaining me life over the course of the game. But Emery can just straight up let me cast dead artifacts. Dredger's Insight is also cheaper by 1 mana, and that does matter. Also, I can mill myself and pull back a land in the early game. Dredger's Insight does get back artifacts too, right? Like, it's artifact, creature, or land, and it's just that only the other two gain me life. Artifact, creature, or land. Yep, okay. So I can get back a land with it, but land does not trigger. Yeah, I'm not prepared to cut either from the self-mill pile just yet. Alright, this is pulling things back from my graveyard. Yeah, all of these feel like they're going to stay for right now. This is my removal package. It might be 3 steps ahead. I am not thrilled about cutting it. But everything else is just better. Yeah, it might be 3 steps, but I'm not sure. We're into card draw. So right now, if I don't cut like Consecrated Sphinx or something, I don't think I can cut anything from card draw. Because all the other things are either doing card draw plus other stuff better or are way cheaper. And my RAM package is incredibly light, so. Alright. Fine, we'll cut Breach. Cut Right Replication. Tadiova and Sir. Is she on another sublist? Oh, right. She was on life gain and card draw. So is Courser. Oh no, Courser's only on life gain because it doesn't actually draw me cards. It just lets me play the land. Alright, so 4 more cuts brings us down to 91. That's still only 7 cuts on the day. So that's a little brutal. But we have to call it there anyway, just because now we're at about the hour mark. So, not a total bust, but took way too much time going over everything. Though sometimes that does help loosen things up a little bit if I'm actually focused on each individual card. But yeah, by the time I get to the other end of the list, like, I'm already starting to break down and just, like, basically mindlessly note each card without actually thinking about it too much. Like, the card itself has to stand out to me at that point for me to go, oh, wait, no, what is this still doing on the list type of thing. And most of them don't when I get to that point, even if they should. So, alright, we'll call it there for right now. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a good rest of your day.